No, I have no idea. It appears our technology is working again, or we've made a workaround. Welcome to this morning's meeting of the Board of County Commissioners. I'd like to invite you to please rise if you can and join us in the flag salute. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This morning, we'll begin with a review of last week's minutes and then consider the consent agenda, basically routine items that we usually approve with a single motion. We try to answer questions that people have during our discussion. And if any item needs to be separately considered, all you have to do is make the request and we'll pull it to the side and consider it separately. Under the motion items today, we have one request from the Sheriff's Office, one request from Emergency Management, and a request from the Commissioner's Office. So with that in mind, I'd like to turn the meeting over to Commissioner Mortensen for the consideration of our minutes.
Good morning, everyone. As usual, I reviewed the minutes of the activities of last week and I move to approve those minutes.
Are there any questions or changes to be considered? All right, all those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. I also vote aye. That motion does carry. Under our consent agenda today, we have an agreement with Playmakers Hospitality Group. They have acquired Summerland Enterprises, the folks who prepared meals at the event center, kind of an exclusive agreement they have to do that. And the company changed hands. So this just simply transfers and also extends their contract to the end of this year. The second item is a grant agreement for reimbursement of expenditures for the Pleasant Hill Road culvert washout. That road culvert washout did allow us to remove a fish barrier, so it's a much more extensive repair, replacing a culvert with a bridge. And so that's that is moving along. The third item is an agreement with Heather Yakely, an attorney for Evans, Craven, and Lackie of Spokane for legal services to the county and the assessor's office. Periodically, the assessor's decisions on property tax assessments will be challenged, oftentimes by large businesses, industries, whose contributions are pretty significant. And so that requires special legal expertise that the office does not have. And so we make the agreement. Prosecuting attorney has agreed to hire this person. Under letters and notices, we've received notice from Lisa Huckleberry that she's resigning as our assistant clerk of the board. We've sent a letter to Colby Connerly, appointing him to serve on the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee through June 30th, 2025. We have reappointed Dale Boltinghouse to allow him to serve on the county's rodeo board for another 4-year term ending at the end of October in 2026. And a fourth letter of appointment went to Gary Fredericks, reappointing him to serve on the Silver Lake Watershed Advisory Council, another 4-year term that will expire at the end of January in 2021. And then we did receive a notice from FERC on something called the Bear River Project. And we're not quite sure what that is because there's no dam covering a Bear River in Cowlitz County. So haven't figured that one out yet, but they sent it to us, so it's on the list. We've also received a notification from the auditor's office that last week she processed a little over $1.4 million in vouchers claims, including special purpose districts. And many of them are working on construction projects that were approved by their boards of directors. So with that, are there any questions, any items you'd like to have separately considered?
So I can't resist a comment. When
Okay.
you, when you were talking on item 3, you used the term the heavy contributions. I think they would call it something else.
Yeah, that is true. Any, hearing no requests for comment or separate consideration, I would entertain a motion to approve today's consent. Oh, sure, come on up.
So it's on the motion for the sheriff's department. Did we or did we not?
So that's not on the consent agenda. That will be the first item we consider on separate. motion.
Okay.
Okay.
And when will we talk about that? We need to talk about that now?
No, we're talking about the consent agenda.
Okay.
So that'll
'Cause
be
you
the next
went
item.
over it,
That'll
so
be the
that's
next
why-
item. So,
That'll be the next item. Okay, well, I want to talk about that
Okay.
when we get there.
thank you. Anyone else?
Okay, I would move to approve the consent agenda as outlined by Commissioner Weber, plus the vouchers and warrants in the amount of $1,142,779.59.
Any further discussion? All right, those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
I also
Aye.
Sorry. I also vote aye. That motion carries. That brings us to our motion items for today. Item number 1 is a request from the sheriff's office. As you may recall, if you have been attending the meetings this year, we have added duties for providing security, both at this building and this campus here, as well as other buildings that the county owns. This is the time when we need to, gather all those different new assignments together into a single contract with Phoenix Protective Services. With all the additions this year, that has jumped the estimated cost to $405,900. And Sheriff Thurman is online. Sheriff?
Yes, good morning, commissioners. And for some reason, my camera's not working, but guess consider that a blessing, perhaps. So Phoenix Protective Corporation that provided services, this will be entering the 4th year that they've done this. We originally signed a 5-year contract with them back in 2020, and it allows for annual reevaluation of the cost based on cost of living. And this is just a reflection of that. It's an 8.1% increase from last year, based on consumer price index, and is what they're requesting to continue their services, as Commissioner Weber mentioned, to the admin building, the Hall of Justice Juvenile Center, and on a part-time basis to the jail courtroom. So we're asking that this be approved to continue this relationship. It's been very good to work with. They have quality staff and provide a quality service to the county.
Now, Sheriff, prior to hiring Phoenix, who provided the security at the Hall of Justice?
That was conducted by deputies, or had been since about 2009. We previously had civilian employees doing it. And then due to some budget cutbacks, we had 4 deputies assigned doing it from about 2009 till 2020.
Thank you. Any questions of the sheriff?
Sheriff, I haven't heard of any complaints or arguments against this kind of change that you mentioned, where the deputies used to do it, and now we have this outside agency doing it. I think that's a good testimonial. Am I off, or is this true?
No, there's been virtually no complaints with the service. I think everybody's been happy with the service they provide. And we do have a deputy assigned during the court hours as well to assist them and the service the courts. But it's been a very productive and positive relationship.
Okay, thank you.
All right, now questions. Good morning.
Good morning. So I have a question.
Mhm.
Did we or did we not, or did you not? Recently, the sheriff's department requested funds for hiring more deputies for the sheriff's department. It was the day that he was brought in and the judge and all that stuff. And then there was a request for funds for hiring. And of course, nobody's going to say no to that because we want a sheriff's department that has good, strong amount of deputies and funds. Am I
So
not
if I
remembering this
remember,
correctly?
if I remember correctly, and perhaps the sheriff can correct me, we had authorized a higher level of deputies. One of the challenges, but not, I don't think in this budget.
No.
No, this
Budgeting
is
is
going to
still the
tie
same.
in, just trust me.
Back before, when we authorized more, they have been actively recruiting and they've had a difficult
Right.
time getting the hires that we've needed.
How much longer are we going to use Phoenix in areas where the sheriff deputies were working? I'm just curious to why we're using Phoenix in areas where the sheriff deputies were doing the job.
Well, if I can address that, a couple of things. One, 4 additional deputies were approved in 2021. And the funding began for that in January 1 of 2022. So that was the last augmentation of staffing. And the reason we went to the Phoenix security and returned actually to a non-deputy security model. That's what we'd had for a number of years from the early 90s to 2009. We had civilians doing it. And due to budget cuts, we put deputies out there doing it. In reality, deputies cost at least $150,000 each per person. That's much better value. We have more people working with Phoenix Security, and it's a lot less expensive to the county to have them out there doing it as opposed to sheriff's deputies on a full-time basis.
Okay, so what is their training as opposed to a sheriff's deputy? And if there were such a situation as to what has gone down in our courthouse, this is the courthouse, right? This is not saying, I'm not talking about the Hall of Justice. I'm talking about what has been going on here during our election season, the things that were going on here. What if that went out? I mean, that was pretty scary. And what is Phoenix? I mean, what can they do? What are they able to carry? Are they able to arrest? Are they able to do the things that are needed to be done that a sheriff's deputy can do?
Well, they're certified and licensed by the Department of Licensing as armed security guards. So it's a extra layer of training and certification than just a security guard that you see. They are armed and they are able to carry out certain duties. Does not exceed what other citizens can do in a active criminal case. They can actually take somebody into custody if there's a crime that occurs in their presence. And as I mentioned previously, we have a deputy, at least in the Hall of Justice, at all times during business hours as well to assist them. The admin building that you're in over there now there's not a deputy there, and there is one security officer there during business hours.
Okay. It just seems to me, it seems odd that we're having a security service doing things that would be for law enforcement. And having been one that would go from the Hall of Justice to the courthouse to different locations, and knowing that we had sheriff deputies in those buildings and feeling safe and secure, and now having security in there, I'm just wondering if others are feeling safe and secure knowing that there's a security officer as to when there was a sheriff deputy that was taking care of them. That's just, I'm just curious. I just feel like it's kind of like, well, we have a security officer that's going to make sure that you're safe and there you go. And then we put in the budget for new recruits but here you go. We've got a security officer for you. It just kind of feels, I don't know.
Yeah, if it's any help, I agree with with the sheriff's assessment completely. It's the camaraderie in law enforcement is such that at any point in time, anybody needs help, and you're going to get help from the police departments, from the sheriff. So it's not like these people are all alone. They're part of a big system.
Okay.
So let me continue a little bit on the same vein on the scope and capability of the Phoenix services, let's say, for instance, right here at the administration building. So if there is an encounter, let's say out in the front street out here or at the post office, is this individual that is on duty here at the admin building all the time capable of being dispatched across the street in a quick, orderly, or are they confined to services here at the administration building? I'm speaking again about scope of service and flexibility and capability.
That's probably a question for Brad, but I can say you've heard that that sometimes along certain highways, they don't have a police car there, or they just park a police car and go away. And that actually has an effect on the way traffic behaves and acts. Just the mere fact that we have a presence here of a guard actually tends to quell anyone's desire to engage in mayhem. So even on that basis alone, I think that's a positive. I don't know, is that where security?
Again,
guard
I'm
is?
asking specifically, if I'm accosted out there at the post office and we have a security guard here, is that security guard able to be dispatched? The public is paying for these services. Are they able to dispatch across the street in a quick order, or are they confined to the administration building?
Brad?
Well, they're not first responders. They're not part of the like 911 system or dispatch. They assigned to the footprint of the county building. I'm confident if they were there and there's something that was going on across the street, they could, on view, they could go across the street and help out, but they are not part of the dispatch network, and we don't expect them to be part of that as a response.
Well, I'm telling you, I'd be awfully disappointed if some local, one of our citizens right across the street was accosted in some way or another, and you said, well, I'm confident that they could go there, but they didn't go there. So that would be a scope of their flexibility to be called or able to go across the street. Again, we the public are paying for this service, not confined to the administration building.
But of course, the post office and the other buildings across the street are in the city of Kelso. That's the first responder.
Then we'd be
situation.
waiting for a policeman to get there when there was one right here, 40 steps away. I'm asking for some addressing the flexibility of these services. They are not confined, we the public, and they're not confined to the administration building. Please give some thought to that.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Just for clarification, I think I've heard 3 separate classifications of people that were providing security for the courthouse, and perhaps over here also, but one of them that the sheriff referenced was security provided by, first of all, the sheriffs, and now by private security, but also he mentioned by citizens. I'm wondering, cost-wise, it seems like there should be 3 separate categories, and he referenced the additional cost of a sheriff or the cost of a sheriff of roughly $150,000. I guess per sheriff. I guess that's an annual cost. Well, I don't know what the annual cost is per security guard through the private security system, but what about the costs for the citizens? I guess were they basically capable of doing the same job that the private security is, and at what cost?
Well, I know the cost under this new contract of one security guard private is about $70,000 under the contract. Is what the cost is. And if I reference citizens' rights, essentially security guards function under the law the same as a citizen in terms of their rights for like a citizen's arrest or to detain somebody for an on-view criminal activity that they see in their presence. The difference here with the private security, they are armed, they are trained, and their focus is solely on security.
Okay, so I guess I didn't catch, what's the difference between the citizen and the armed security guard?
Well, citizens can take action in certain circumstances on view for criminal activity, as can armed security guards. The difference is these folks have a degree of training. They're licensed by the Department of Licensing to be armed security guards, and they are dedicated to their post, which in the case over there is the admin building. In this case over here is the Hall of Justice or the Juvenile Center. That is their post, and their full-time job is to be vigilant. And over here in a juvenile, we do screening of everybody coming into the building as well, security screening. Because they do provide a higher level of service and security.
So I guess we're getting a higher level of security with the armed security guards, but at some point in time, it was acceptable to use citizens.
We had the civilian back prior to 2009, we had unarmed civilians that were employees of the county doing that. They were screening people as they came through the front doors of the Hall of Justice, but they were not armed as the current configuration is with Phoenix security.
And they were not providing security over here.
Pardon me?
They were not providing security here at this building.
Okay,
They were over at the Hall of Justice.
just the Hall of
at
Justice.
the
Okay.
screening.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chairman, I'm reading a question and there's a constituent who is unhappy because if I understand the message, they only see the agenda. They do not see the people speaking. So I don't know whether that's an accurate description. It might be, we have the agenda up there, and I think that's what the public sees. It's just the agenda.
Are they not on Zoom, or are they watching it on the KLTV?
They're on Zoom, I presume, or we wouldn't be seeing him on this on the Q&A.
They should be able to see them on the side. It would be.
It should be like that, though.
Mhm. It should be an option in their Zoom meeting.
Okay, thank you.
So I just have a question about transparency. Are these Phoenix group, are they held to the same standards as the sheriff's department on records requests and things like that?
I'm not sure what kind of records. They're not issuing tickets or anything like that. They're not
But if an
arresting
incident
anybody.
happened and somebody wanted to records request that incident, are they held to the same standards our sheriff's department is?
So, I mean, if they're generating public documents, yes, they would be, but
But our sheriff's department have cameras, they have, we can ask for those at any time. Okay, do you-
Certainly at the Hall of Justice. Here, I don't think we have that.
I don't think they're generating any public requests or public documents.
So any interaction with any incident, there's usually a records, but these people don't have to keep records of that. I'm just trying to see public you know what I mean? Transparency. I know if I needed body footage of whatever happened in Longview, I would just type on my computer and they would send it to me. These people, when there's an incident, nothing is recorded, nothing is, like if they're kicking somebody out.
I mean, it depends. I'm not aware that they're actually compiling incident reports or things like that. It's,
I'm pretty sure that anything of substance ends up in a report. Now, if you're saying I
Of
took a
substance.
citizen across the street, like our guard sometimes escorts
Right.
people over there, that doesn't go down into a logbook. I'm sure of that. But if there was a problem, you can almost be sure that there's contact with 911 to start with. But I think Brad could chime in here and clarify this a little bit.
Yes, there is video in the lobby of the Hall of Justice available. So there is a video backup, and if they do something of substance, it is documented in writing and would be available through the sheriff's office, anything they report to us.
Okay,
Document.
thank you.
so we did have a question online about why people at the courthouse aren't visible. And as they mentioned, the camera is not working, and that's what the sheriff said that. Good morning.
Hello. Does the county ever negotiate cost increases when they receive something like this? Or you just accept that the service costs more and we're gonna just eat the cost and add it to the budget?
Usually there's some pretty clear conventional language and procedure for cost escalation. And depends on the kind of contract around. This one, Brad is more intimate than we, but just in general, there are escalation clauses.
Yeah, so this is a almost $406,000 increase. So it looks like the overall contract is over $5 million, and we're just adding another almost $500,000 without the details. So I think
That's the total cost. The total cost would be the 406,000. If they're fully.
okay, sorry, the agenda
That's-
said an increase to the agreement, so I was assuming that it was adding to the total cost.
No.
It's ambiguous, as the sheriff said, it's an 8.5%, 8.1%.
8.1. Yeah, that
was negotiated with the county purchasing officer, Ashley Clausen, put that together. So it was negotiated and discussed with the vendor.
So the 406 is the total amount of the contract, including the 8% increase. That is not the amount of the 8% increase.
No, that's the total cost of the contract in total. They're fully staffed out to the maximum, and they don't always do that. There's at times where there's holidays and other short days where people we're not fully staffed. So it's probably actually less than that. That is a maximum.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? Oh, yes. Good morning.
Good morning. I may not have totally understood what he was just saying. My question is, as a negotiator of contracts for the state for about 10 years, none of us got a 8% raise. And I was wondering if the deputies got an 8% raise. That seems a steep, but really nice raise for those that got it.
Brad, did you want to tackle that about the increase in the in all of this?
Well, yeah, certainly. I think we're all aware of how inflation's ran through the economy, and we're seeing that everywhere, gas pump, grocery store. And yes, we just, the commissioners approved a contract with the deputies here about 2 weeks ago where their increase for 2023 was 7%. And it was 5% for the following year and 4% the next year. So 8.1 is not, I guess, out of line with what we're seeing in the general economy.
Anyone else?
Yeah, also, I just want to caution people like I have before. When you're talking about a percentage increase, you really need to understand the full context. What was the baseline? Was the baseline an introductory price or any of the other things that can happen? So I've heard of people being incensed over 100% increase in the profits of a company that made made 1 cent last year, and this year they're making 2 cents. And you got to think about things in perspective.
Anyone else? You've heard the sheriff's request. What are your wishes?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the agreement with PPC Solutions as has been discussed.
Any further discussion? Any comments online? I am looking for hands raised. Seeing
No
none.
hands raised.
All right. All those in favor of the motion then say aye.
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 I also vote aye. That motion does carry. The next item is from our Department of Emergency Management, and I know the director is here. Ernie, if you want to give a presentation on this agreement.
Good morning, gentlemen. Thank you very much for having me. We have received $10,500 grant from Washington State Emergency Management Division that is based on the legislature, the state legislature having set aside $7.5 million for individual assistance after disasters that happened. In this particular case, this $10,500 grant that we have received will compensate one resident in the West County who qualified for all the criteria to have her walkway. Yes,
Could
sir.
you be sure that the microphone is much closer to you? It moves.
Got it.
You can pull it much closer to you.
It's already by my nose.
There we
Sorry.
go. There we go. Yes, it is.
So that one particular resident on the west end of the county had her walkway from the property line to the house washed away and had to be repaired, was not covered by insurance. She qualified for all the criteria that had to do with the minimum or the maximum household income and the fact that she is also handicapped. So that's was the criteria for the grant. So we will be able to reimburse her for the costs that she has already expended, and then the county will send reimbursement request to the state and get fully refunded. We had the total. This is the disaster that we had, the declared disaster by the state that we had this late December and early January a year ago. And we had 5 individuals come to us for an application in order to get refunded or some expenses that they had. But only the one person really qualified under the criteria. So in front of you is that grant agreement that we would encourage you to consider signing.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ernie?
Hi, Dennis, it's me again. Your favorite person. Talking about this, would that couple that came in a while ago, I think it was Tower Road that washed out or whatever, would they qualify for that? I mean,
Interestingly, that particular event happened a little bit later and was not declared an emergency. So those funds don't count.
that's,
And I'm not sure that couple that had the house on the edge, their income was
Oh.
too high anyway. They
Oh,
wouldn't qualify
okay,
for this
okay.
particular.
I
this
just was
particular
thinking
program.
that would have been
Yeah.
good for them.
The governor chose not, he didn't say it was a large enough disaster, right? So.
Okay, thank you.
So I've got, to me, this is a very hard issue. Back in about 1820, Davy Crockett was a congressman, and there's a story involved. Many of us know the story. Essentially, he was using federal funds to help people whose apartment buildings had burnt down. And that led to a big discussion. And it's pretty clear that while the intent is a good thing, the end result is what we have today, a welfare industrial complex that is completely out of control. And this is the thing that's strange here is that normally you would think that the Department of Emergency Management would not be involved in a sort of welfare system. And I think I kind of resent myself in this position trying to decide what is good for you. So most of the time I'm trying to decide how to protect you from the ravages of the government. That's a lot easier position to take. But to decide in this case that those people over there deserve the $10,000 about those people over there, that's an endless, hopeless game that we've been sucked into playing. That kind of money, $10,000, could be raised by your neighbors, any number of things, but we have come to depend on the government for these things, and I don't know that people realize you're destroying your nation by doing that. Anyhow.
Since I didn't comment last week, I'll say Happy New Year. I'm curious how long Ernie has been in the emergency management department.
I've been here 10 years and 2 months.
Okay, so not since the floods of 1996, because that was a doozy. So that's why I asked, is because I was curious, and that was a while ago. I don't know that anybody in this room even knows if this grant was in place during the floods of 96. Maybe nobody knows. 'Cause I'm
Well,
just
I
curious.
do know that there has been a number of instances where either the state or the federal government through FEMA have intervened and have provided assistance. In one particular area, Westover Creek comes down off of Columbia Heights, roughly parallels Nevada Drive and comes down into the flatland next to West Side Highway. And that has traditionally backed up as more development has occurred up on the hill. There's more water that drains down the valleys. And so I know that there have been houses that have been purchased, and because of the damage, they no longer exist. And I actually believe the county may own the lot that it sits on. And in other instances, another remedy is lifting the house up above the typical flood stage. So I know that there's been some assistance that's been given. But it's like 7, 8, 9 years of paperwork that you have to go through with the federal government to get those kinds of assistance. So this one is actually pretty quickly done, but again, not as much money in this instance.
Mhm. So my last question is, anyone who receives this grant money, will they receive a tax form in the mail, thus causing them to have an income tax, have to pay income tax on the grant money received? Because I would think that that person would want to be prepared for having to pay taxes on $10,000.
I don't think that most grants are not taxable, but I'm not sure on something like this. So it obviously it helps enhance their property values and so on. However, they have to be low income. So it could very well be they don't earn enough to pay taxes under our current federal government tax system.
Right, because I was just thinking how I
Which
knew
is different from
somebody.
saying if they get a job, they still have to have taxes withheld. That's a different law. But
Well, I knew somebody that lost their house in Aldercrest. They could not live in it anymore per, whoever deems that in the government that says your house is being condemned. But they still had a loan with XYZ Credit Union, which then got forgiven-ish, kind of so many cents on the dollar, if whatnot. But then they lost their house and got like, had to pay $26,000 or something like that to the federal government as if it were income.
So forgiveness
that
of a
was a
loan,
surprise.
forgiveness of a loan does become taxable income. That's IRS code
Yeah.
takes care of that. So
So everybody should remember that in case they ever get like a college forgiveness, anything. You just never know the unintended consequences.
thank you.
Continuing on some of the vein that Arn was on.
Ron, if you can tip it down a
Okay.
little bit close, go ahead and bend it down. There you go.
Very good.
There
Okay,
we go.
thank you.
Good.
So continuing on the same vein, I'm just asking, how is we society responsible or incriminated into paying for this walkway that's replaced? I can see addressing some of that, but we're on the same vein going on down the road here of society picking these things up. I feel sorry for people on happening, but you also inherit a responsibility. We need to keep pushing back on people for where they live, where they buy, where they purchase, et cetera, as a part of responsible society citizens. So and secondly, is that this creek and washing out the walkway. I know people that have walkways that wash out periodically. They have a chain or whatever on it. It goes out and they push it back and it goes in. So I just like, how are we helping in establish a sense of responsibility and a duration that they can't come back again next year or 5 years because their walkway washed out again? I'm looking at you and I'm helping support you in being and engaging responsible citizens.
Thank you. Thank you. My assumption is, and I can rely on Ernie, this is a state program. So it's our lovely friends in Olympia that have designed the process. Yep.
With everybody pulling out of it until it's empty. And then we fill it again.
If there were a way natural disasters didn't happen, that life would be less complicated, but I understand what you mean.
Disasters will happen whenever.
Yeah, actually, there's an episode from many years ago, John Stossel thanking the public for rebuilding his house on the beach on the East Coast. It got wiped out by a hurricane, and he was actually arguing against that kind of program. And I think he was on point. Here, one of the things we ought to do, which we don't do, is not sanction building in floodplains. We last year approved a chunk of money to go to a development in Castle Rock, which is development's going to be in the floodplain, and they said, well, we'll build it up. And that's fine, except that when they come back to us and say we lost our house because of the flood, we think we owe them the house, but in fact, we should have not sanctioned the building of the house in the first place. But I could go on for quite a bit, but we have an illustrious speaker.
Hello, thank you for the opportunity.
It does remind me though of, it's kind of related. We had, the sheriff and I hosted a meeting yesterday afternoon with folks from most of the rural fire districts, and they've alerted us to an interesting phenomenon that is happening, is that there are increasing numbers of people who are choosing to build homes outside of fire district boundaries, which means when there is an emergency and they call 911, they don't get fire protection, and the ambulance is not going to be sent out to help them at all. They're on their own. And it was kind of interesting. Why would you allow people to do that? On the one hand, we want to maximize people's freedom of action. And we also have rules that we can't make a gift of public funds. If you're not in the district, you're not paying taxes for the service, you can't get claims on those those services. So, and it's a real dilemma because we do hire dispatchers who then are put into that very awkward situation of saying, no, you don't get the service, even though you're having an emergency. It's a little bit related, but it's again, how you give people maximum opportunities and expect that they are make responsible choices.
That's not the holistic view of that. My understanding is that people in that situation where they're outside the county, or outside the fire district, they can actually pay an annual fee and become a member of the fire department, if you will. And the game is like almost any other game, is like, well, I'm not going to have a fire, so I don't pay. If there were complete honesty, then pay for the service would occur and we wouldn't have a problem. And the fire district stuff gets pretty complicated on other things like the ambulance. But anyhow, that's a different story.
Getting back to this item here, appreciate the opportunity to hear about the number of requests and the number of folks that were eligible for this award. Disasters do happen, and I think it is great that we have an emergency management department at our county. Thank you, Mr. Schnabler, for your service to our county for the last decade. And I'm always curious when things like this are available. What is the way that people are informed that there's potential relief available that they might qualify for? Was it just 5 people that called you up, or was there some sort of public communication? Or
Yeah, when these funds become available, which they had never been before, unless it was really a very, very large disaster by national standards, by FEMA standards, which we haven't had in a long time. Those individual assistance programs, this is the first time in my 10 years here that this became available, and it was not federally funded, but state funded. It was state originated. What we do then is we reach out with our public information possibilities. So we're using not just the ordinary press release or the calls to the daily news, etc. We use Facebook and social media as well. Our social media program for emergency management department is really huge. We have about 25,000 Facebook followers on our Facebook page. And if you take when folks kind of repost a Facebook page, we have a real good penetration, quote unquote, in the population of the 105,000 in Cowlitz County. So we're really proud of that. So that goes out that way. We had only five people coming back to us, and 4 of them unfortunately did not qualify because they had higher income than, and that was a mandatory type of thing that the state has set up as a criterion.
thank you. So it sounds like you're reasonably confident that that's probably the best reach that we were able to get. And that, do you think that's the number of people that were impacted, or would you expect there would have been broader impact than the number?
Well,
of
I'm
people?
sure there is a lot more people that had damaged during that December. There were several storms that came through the area, but it was just 5 that came to us. So, and you also have to recognize that some of the damage was probably covered by homeowners insurance.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Not to belabor the point, but I want to make sure I understood something here, that if you build a house outside of the fire district, is that outside of emergency management? In other words, they have no sheriff's office coverage?
Well, they certainly have sheriff's coverage, but
Okay, so they have other emergency services, just lose fire and ambulance?
It's complicated because there are districts, and each district, fire district, say, has a ability to reach into the pocket through typically property taxes of every person inside the boundary. To build outside the boundary is completely your choice. It's subject to building and planning kind of codes, but it does not require any membership in the fire department. The sheriff is hired for the entire county.
Okay, so,
Yes,
so the people outside of that boundary, there's some type of a program where they can opt in and pay an annual fee or whatever. Can somebody inside the boundary opt out?
nope.
Okay. So
I like your thinking.
well, I've been in this very discussion that, in a different context, but anyway, I just was curious. All right, thank you.
Thanks. So you've heard the request from the department. What are your wishes?
I'm not, these things are best handled by community. We got to break this cycle of being in the trough all the time, and I'm not willing to offer a motion on it.
So actually, we could use your guidance on this, Mr. Chairman. Should we make a motion even though we oppose it, or should we just be silent?
Well, if we don't act on a motion, then no decision is made. If you want to send a message with a very distinct message, we need to have a vote. So we should, we've had the request from the department. We need to have a decision made.
Agreed. So I'll go ahead and make the motion. So moved as has been discussed.
All right. Any further discussion? Go ahead.
Am I understanding that you're proposing not even considering action? Oh, I guess you are now. So you're going to make a motion, but I guess I'm just perplexed that there's a state grant that was made. Someone at the state allocated these funds, and there was lots of oversight for that. We had a number of people apply for the assistance that was available, and our Department of Emergency Management went through the trouble of sorting through all of those applications and determining which ones were eligible, determined that one of those applications did meet the criteria that the state allocated these funds for. And now our county commissioners are saying they disagree with the state's allocation and they're not willing to allocate these funds.
You understand?
That seemed pretty outrageous to me. Why do we have a government if you're not gonna take action on the things that have been brought into their conclusion? All you have to do is move forward with the assessment. There's lots of oversight for these funds. There's all sorts of requirements. You're unwilling to allocate the funds after all of this work. That's what you're saying, Mr. Dahl?
You understand.
That's insane. Wow.
Any other comments? Go ahead, come on.
In respecting your assessment of the situation, I, again, in negotiating with my own family or state would say, what is a shared responsibility? If the cost was $10,500, we normally have the opportunity to say, okay, now we'll do a shared funding. Okay, I'll assume some part of taking money out of the public to help you, but I'm not going to fund the full thing. So I'm just putting it on the table that you can show some sort of consideration for the situation, but not set the example of paying for the full funding, whatever that case is. And I certainly don't know the details.
I think that's probably not giving the right signal. Among other things, we should really take into account that this $10,000 probably after everybody's had their hands on it, all the staff and everything, we're talking about $100,000.
I agree.
Okay.
Actually, I'd like to answer the gentleman that said this was insane. What he doesn't understand, and I'm sorry for this poor lady that lost her walkway. I really truly am. Again, I think it's a community action that should be helping her.
And there are ways of getting that help from the community instead of going to the state.
Flo, as you look at him, your voice is going in and out of the
I'm
mic,
sorry,
so
I'm sorry. Thank you. Again, what people don't understand, and this is what needs to be really pushed through, that every time that we have a giveaway program, and even though it's very well meant, it is raising our taxes. And eventually with this, I know I harp on it, the recession that is coming to bear on our communities, it's going to be unbearable. Again, and it's always been in our American history, is that the people get together and they help these people. There are churches, there are people to go to instead of the state. The state, when you get a grant, you get commitment, you get ties. There is always something tied to that grant that you are obligated for. And that's what we want to get away from. We do not want government from Olympia to govern our lives as much as they are. And that's what I need to tell this gentleman. It's not an insane decision.
Arn touched a little bit, and I think it's a good point. It's not, by the time I've talked about this government as being this totally inefficient middleman, that as they suck stuff out of your wallet, they for every however much, probably $100 they suck out of your wallet, you get one back. And it's so inefficient that we need to get them, the middleman needs to be pared back. Now, if we want to do things as a county, as a community, that's $1 to $1. Church, I know there's clubs that build ramps and do all kinds of things. There's resources around where you can get very efficient use of the money. You get $1 to $1 instead of taking excess money out of people's pockets all the time and then giving us back these small pittance amounts. You have to break that cycle. You have to, and it's not always easy and it's not always comfortable, but it has to be done.
Yes, sir. I guess we get from different kinds of thinking, but when I was raised, we were in a rural area and there was nothing like that. The government didn't provide anything like that.
Electricity.
And there was a certain amount of risk that you accepted. And the community, if something did happen, would pitch in to make things happen. Didn't have any government attachment at all. And as government began to become more affluent and provide that type of thing, we begin to lose freedoms. And that's one of the difficulties we have now is that we're beginning to become controlled entirely by government. And that's probably why you have the group of people in here at these county commissioner meetings expressing their positions on these things, is because they realize their freedoms are being extracted from them.
Just briefly, I wanted to say that I support Commissioners Dahl and Mortensen's position on this issue and agree with them 100%. Thank you very much.
Now, I know we have a number of volunteer and then paid organizations that cover these kinds of things that could do that, but I'm just question for you is, do you have any contact with, other, just civilian organizations that would do this kind of work?
We have a lot of volunteers that support our programs, but none that do construction, unfortunately.
Okay. Well, you mentioned, have you ever tried to put out an outreach to find people that would do this? I ask this because, first of all, we're talking about a handicap ramp
to a house, right? I mean, that's what this was.
No, it's a walkway. It's actually a washed out concrete and gravel kind of things.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not an engineer. I
Really? So what's the distance and length of this thing?
I don't have those records with me, but we have pictures. We have an assessment. We have from the lady also received, if I'm not mistaken, three estimates and then the invoice from the contractor that actually performed the service.
I guess where I wanted to go with this is, you know, you mentioned having a great outreach on social media and stuff. You know, maybe you could, like, in your position, be a center guy and volunteers could come to you with construction experience or, you know, equipment, say, you know, bad things are going to happen in the future. We'll line up here to help in these categories, you know, and be like a coordinator for that. That's just a suggestion.
Thank you.
I think all of our commenters are going in the right direction, and thank you to the two commissioners and the third one that hopefully will support this. This is a country of volunteers. And I think the last comment to you about becoming a coordinator, we had a well-known retired contractor volunteer, I believe, to pull together a whole bunch of people and put up all of the pallet houses in Camp Alabama. So there are plenty of people around here that will step forward for the right causes. And I think it's just a matter of people like us in here, or maybe you in the position you're in, to use social media. And I'll bet you'd have more help and you'd have to start turning away help. So I would applaud that effort.
It's me again.
So an organization, a nonprofit, can you hear me? It's so creepy. A nonprofit that I have, did you just chuckle? You made Dennis laugh. That I have volunteered with and have, it's called Love Inc. And I have their flyer. And I have done a lot of stuff with them. I've done painting and stuff with them. They do all kinds of stuff. They do ramps, they do lawn care, they do food distribution, moving assistance, helping other organizations like they help us at H&A. They have God's Garage where they help widows and single women, like single mothers, single fathers with their cars. Firewood, bicycles, bicycle repair, refurbish, that kind of thing. Medical equipment, furniture, household goods. And they take donations and they also need volunteers. And I know that they have called people several times for situations like this. And it's like Larry said, and several other people said, it's a community thing. So if we I think I know the retired contractor. Anyways, if we gathered together as a community, we could help this woman and not have to take money from Olympia. Just my thought. And Love Inc., they do amazing things.
Mhm. Anyone else? Come on.
Good morning, commissioners. This is not what I came for today, but being a current wildland contract firefighter for the United States Forest Service and over 50 years service as a volunteer firefighter in Cowlitz County, and going through the 96 flood with the Willow Grove Diking District and the Washington National Guard. You're looking at an older version now of the boots on the ground. And I'll just take one incident which Commissioner Mortensen pointed out. There should be a community group of volunteers. Well, there was in 96. We just about lost the Willow Grove Dike on the Columbia River side, in the same place where my late father and Postmaster Bill Stiles just about lost it in 1948. And you're wondering, it should have been a community action without government involvement. Well, we had the Diking District there and we had the National Guard there. And we also had the county there. Art Jordan, who was head of search and rescue, was traffic control at the time. Because there were no deputies available, the county was pretty well taxed out as far as law enforcement and other emergency services. And the funny thing, we were transporting sandbags with National Guard vehicles, and the whole community in the Willow Grove Diking District was involved, and we were all unpaid. And we started a daisy chain trying to save the dike in the same place that it broke in 48. And we were successful, thank God. But the most interesting point, the day after, when the weather finally cleared, there were numerous sandbags. And in 96, the county ran out of sandbags and they had to go to Victoria, British Columbia to get another supply. But there was sandbags blocking the county road on top of the dike. And at that time, the late Commissioner Van Youngquist lived in that area. And I might point out, he didn't do a damn thing to help us, even though he was a county commissioner. So they opened up the road the day after, and the sandbags were still blocking the road. And there was a county truck at the Willow Grove Community House. And I was the only one left after everybody went home to sleep. So I volunteered to take the county truck and remove the sandbags free of charge. By this time, the guardsmen had gone back to the armory, so I didn't have any help. And there was Commissioner Youngquist standing beside the road watching me load the county truck. And then later on, the commissioner of the Diking District for Willow Grove had to come up to me and he said, well, Steve, you can't be doing that. And I go, what? They've opened up the road. We've got to get these sandbags out of here. And the one who complained about a person driving a county vehicle free of charge, removing sandbags in a county road, it was County Commissioner Van Youngquist. That's all I've got to say.
There are a lot of you all and only one of me, so I hope you'll allow me just a little follow-up on why I think this is sort of a dangerous precedent to set. So I do agree with several of the past commenters that we have an amazing volunteer community here in Cowlitz County, that people do pull together and that there is a lot that can be done to deliver relief to our fellow citizens through those efforts. But volunteers are just that. They are unpaid and there is no obligation for them to continue volunteering beyond their interest in doing so. Which is why there are things like government grants for when disasters occur to help support people in the aftermath after a disaster occurs. If we were to manage as a county these types of situations only through volunteer efforts, how would the 5 people that self-identified even have known that they could get help from their community? Are we going to change our practice to start saying, hey, come to us with your volunteer ideas? Do you need an army of volunteers? We're going to use our county resources to organize all of that and make sure you get the help you need. What sort of criteria would the volunteers use to determine where to best place their efforts? Would it be a first come, first serve basis where perhaps the 4 requests that were well off enough not to meet the income requirements for this funding, where they would have gotten help first and perhaps the volunteers could have been burnt out by the time that 5th request came in and, oh, sorry, too bad, we don't have anything to help you. So while I appreciate the sentiment of wanting to stand on our own 2 legs in our community, there are good reasons for disaster relief. There are responsible people at the state that declared this situation to be an emergency. And in terms of efficiency, it is highly inefficient for us as a county to have done all of the work of announcing that this funding was available, soliciting applications, sorting through all of those to determine eligibility, going back and forth, getting this individual person to get 3 bids to determine a reasonable cost, having that be brought to you only then to say, oh, sorry, we don't believe in this. We're creating the welfare state, so we're not going to allow this funding to be allocated. That is highly inefficient. You have wasted all of these people's time. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Well, actually, if we didn't have people expecting free lunch, we wouldn't have wasted all this time to begin with. Yeah, just in case this vote goes the way I think it's going, how do we maintain contact with this individual so that we can actually get people over there to help take care of the problem?
Well, first of all, I'll probably have to write her a letter because I think the commissioners are going to delegate that to me. And if you give me any kind of information of volunteers that are willing to go and do some concrete work, please let me know. I'll put some of my cards here on the table and I'll be more than happy to coordinate that.
Thank you.
We have a hand up. I think Darcy needs to be promoted to a panelist.
Hello. Didn't the man on staff say that the project has been completed and the resident who replaced her walkway will be reimbursed?
That is correct. She has other damage that she did not come forward and had it repaired yet. She just had it repaired to the fact that she could actually get into and out of her house.
Okay. Anyone else? So I think you were
I made
going
the
to, you
motion.
made the motion, yes. If seeing no further debate, all those in favor of the motion vote aye. All those opposed vote no.
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 I will vote yes, but the motion does fail. And I vote yes. The arguments are very good. It's just that we take an oath of office to uphold the laws of the state as well as the constitutions of Washington and the United States. This is one of those situations where the state has set forth the rules. They've asked us to be the administrators. It's state law. The complaint should be with the state legislature, and we're not the state legislature as much as we want to be. And I think the record will send a message, and hopefully that'll make a difference. The legislature is in session as we speak, and that's where those decisions on reducing the welfare state has to come. So thank you.
Just a comment. I surely hope you're not inferring that we're trying to violate the law, certainly for in this particular instance.
Which
law did we violate?
the law that established the individual assistance grant. It's the very first word in the agenda item, state. Individual assistance grants, not something we invented. It's something the state provided.
No, this is not a situation where you can impress the public into service. This is a service, supposedly a service being offered. If we take it or don't take it, that's a choice of the body. So that's not a violation of any law at all.
Yes.
Oh, this kind of went sideways for what I was going to come up here to talk about, but I would assume that basically if it was a law that you wouldn't have an option, you wouldn't get to vote on it. So it's something that you get to choose, and the vote goes up or down. If it was required to be automatic because it's a law, I can't imagine you'd have the right to vote on it. However, what I was going to ask is, I understand this work has already been done, so basically it's a reimbursement of funds.
That is correct.
Okay. Also, the total cost of that project was based on bids from contractors.
Yes, sir.
So my first inclination would be to say that had it been done by volunteers, I would imagine that the cost would have been about a third of what it would have been paying for all the labor and everything. But anyway, neither here nor there. And unfortunately, based on some of the previous comments in this regard, where assuming that for every $10 that goes to the state, if you get one back, unfortunately, in this case, 90% of that money's already been spent. But somewhere, somehow, you have to be one step in front of this. And I agree with the vote, the way that it came out, to try and stop pursuing the welfare state. Just my 2 cents. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ernie. The last item on our agenda today is a request for travel to National Association of Counties Congressional Conference. This was a request that I made pursuant to several policy objectives. The board had directed me to be involved with federal issues, including working with the federal lobbyists that we have hired in pursuit of legislation, making sure that the Corps of Engineers does carry out their congressional mandate and monitor the sediment flow, which we were able to get reestablished. But as the lobbyists are always recommending that down the road, it's about the relationships that are developed with the folks back in Washington, D.C. So once a year, the National Association has a congressional conference. And I have been going a couple of times in the past. I've done separate trips back to DC at other times on my own, with travel reimbursements from the county. And the request is to attend this year, particularly with the new election. It's important to have somebody from the county to do that. In addition, I do serve on the state association's federal issues committee, and was able to put into the state federal issues document a policy statement endorsing the work of the collaborative, bringing various local, state, tribal, and federal agencies together to coordinate the efforts to get ahead of the sediment flow, to manage it better, to monitor it, and to do what needs to be done to protect and enhance flood protection in the lower Cowlitz Valley. So my request is to go back again for about a week in February. Is there motion to approve?
I think you want to ask for discussion first, don't you?
Well, either one.
You've got a hand up.
Yes. Darcy?
Yeah, the most basic but most important piece of information regarding this request is missing. How much will this conference cost the people of Cowlitz County? And what benefits will the people of Cowlitz County receive from your attendance? How much have the people of Cowlitz County paid in dues to this organization so far? And I see on their website that they offer different things like programs, webinars, and advocacy to the members in general. And do those cost extra? And who are all of the past delegates? So you said that you've been a couple of times, and Commissioner Mortensen shared his experience with the conference and concluded that it was that he considered it a waste of county taxpayer dollars. There are 3,243 counties and boroughs, most with wildly different needs than Cowlitz. So the strength in numbers argument that I heard at the previous meeting just does not hold water. One level of government should not need to fight or make a show of force against another level of government in order to serve the people. By reviewing the organization's YouTube, I see that Biden and several members of the Biden administration were speakers at the conference. I'm guessing this may be something that Commissioner Weber looks forward to. And I also noticed that individuals affiliated with this organization are invited to be present at White House and Capitol occasions, which you may also consider a thrilling experience. However, these PR and photo ops are of no value to the people of Cowlitz County. The practical question is, in what ways has Cowlitz County's involvement in the NAOC directly benefited the people of Cowlitz County? This organization's website says it benefits 40,000 elected officials and 3.6 million employees, but it says nothing about helping the people of the counties. I read further on the organization, and for nearly every person either holding a position or featured on their website, a simple internet search of their names resulted in articles reporting controversies and scandals. I'm not anxious for our county to be associated. For example, the immediate past president, Larry Johnson, a Democrat from DeKalb County, Georgia, I found two articles. The commissioner was accused of using public credit cards for personal purchases, and in another, he attempted to race bait a fellow commissioner. Second Vice President James Gore, a Democrat from Sonoma County, California, found three articles on him. One, he has not been transparent about his family's ties to the industry of big wine, and also he has failed to disclose his wife's income. Ron Berry, an independent from the South, who is a South Region representative, runs as an independent because he was removed from GOP ballot for not following the election rules. Mark Polenkars, Democrat from Erie County, Northeast Region, he threatened to shoot a process server who came to his home. And he also has threatened and punished businesses and individuals regarding mask mandates, but failed to follow the rules himself. Merceria Ledgood, a Democrat from Mobile County, Georgia, featured on the About page, was compelled to resign due to improper status. Melissa Cribbins, a Democrat from Coos County, also featured on the About page, was accused of cronyism and improper spending of funds. I have links to all these articles, and I'm prepared to send them to you, Mr. Weber, in an email, but I did have trouble with your email address earlier, so I'll have to double check that. But basically, I'm thinking this travel opportunity seems to be more of a fringe benefit, paid vacation, than something that would be of value to the people of Cowlitz County. And this is the type of action that causes resentment by citizens toward elected officials. We have innumerable other projects that require funding and will be a direct asset to the people of the county. Let's spend our money on those instead of frittering it away on rubbing shoulders in Washington, D.C. Thank you.
I don't think she wants me to go.
More receptive than I thought you were, Dennis. Making headway. We could talk all day, but this is a pretty short and simple matter. I could be petty, which I accused Commissioner Weber of being last week with his letter, but I won't be. So therefore, I won't be petty addressing Commissioner Mortensen this morning because you've been extremely petty here, Commissioner. I don't appreciate that. But I will address the fact that if you find it a useless trip, it's only because you couldn't find a way to make it useful. I've been to Washington, D.C. 4 times myself. 20 years ago, I was a registered lobbyist in Olympia. And it's very useful for doing these things if you make it useful, because believe me, the constituents are going to get matter. And as a personal matter, to make this an election issue, which is trying to become an issue, what this is about is, rubbing politics here. PUD Commissioner Dean Diamond Ott from Kalama, who is now a resident of the state of the state of Texas, when she ran for the PUD office, she made going to these things a big thing she was against. Let's save some money and not send anybody. Took her 2 years into her 6-year term to figure out, hey, we need to go to these things because there's a lot of value to be had. And let me repeat myself, if you can't find value from going, you don't need to go. You really don't need to go. But if you really are interested in representing your constituents, you should find a way to make this thing valuable and get some value out of it. I could go into further detail, but there's no reason to do that. And I most respectfully request Commissioner Dahl take the stance he took a few weeks ago, not cutting somebody's legs out from underneath them when it's already set in motion. This, I don't know what the cost is, what the flight of an airfare to DC, what are hotel rooms now? Probably a couple $100 a night. I haven't been back there for 10 years. Yeah. Airfare, you can probably get there for $500. So you got $3,000 rooms and meals. Pretty small drop in the bucket for a bucket that Cowlitz County is. Thank you very much for your time and consideration.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Commissioners, I'd like to engage the same form of discussion about challenging each other on the merits and the value of this trip to the citizens of Cowlitz County. I'm all in favor of things that we can do to mitigate or prevent the future disaster of the Cowlitz River flooding due to sediment in there. And therefore, you should be challenged with some very specific metrics of what you're there to achieve, the discussions you're there to have, and bring back some report to us on what you expect actions to be. The previous discussion, a perfect example, we're talking about $10,500, probably $100,000 of funds that we all supported to get there. And I don't know what prevention was in that at all. This is an opportunity for prevention and securing sediment, et cetera. But I also believe that there should be a challenge on the metrics of what you're going to achieve and what the benefit is to the citizens.
Hello, I do think that it is beneficial to the citizens of Cowlitz County to have our elected leaders representing us in Washington, D.C. in this capacity. Yeah, that's it. I think it's a legitimate use of funds, and I would support Commissioner Weber going on this to represent our community. We don't have a voice if we don't show up. I don't think anyone else from Cowlitz County is going to be going if Commissioner Weber doesn't to represent us on these issues. So I think it is appropriate.
So one of the things that I did mention that I have been working on over the past several years is the issues with the sediment management, which did ultimately result in a federal budget item of $900,000 a year. We have to make sure that that continues. But it's not just Mount St. Helens issues. The other issues continue to be economic development, making sure that the opportunities to improve the infrastructures like the requests from the ports and for railroad expansion, that there's local support generated and shown back there. We also have some continuing issues that have to be addressed in other parts of the county. For example, exit 21 is part of the state highway system, but they depend on federal funds. We need to make sure if there's a possibility of getting those federal funds available, that's a possibility. We had a concern from customers in the Toutle area about extensive arsenic in well water, and they requested help. And through lobbying efforts and requests made not only by letter, but with personal contacts, federal funds have been made available to address the arsenic in the drinking water up there. There are those kinds of projects all along on a number of different areas that I think it makes a difference to have somebody from, the real world, as they say, to be back there and making connections. The bureaucrat who had cut the funding for sediment monitoring, when we found out who he was and made an arrangements to visit with him and show the aerial maps that indicated that the sandbars were filling in the lower Cowlitz Valley. He thanked me for coming. He said, we just don't get that type of interaction from people out in the countryside. So it's happened often enough when I've had those kinds of responses that I think it's an important presence. Do we have to be back there all the time? No. But it simply adds value to the people that we hire to do the lobbying day to day on our behalf. They ask for that kind of backup. The kind of snarky comment about looking forward to see President Biden. I actually went to 2 White House conferences for local leaders under the Trump administration. Again, in order to make contacts for the different programs that are important for Cowlitz County citizens. So can you put down a specific dollar amount for each trip that's happened? No, because it does involve relationships. I feel in this position, in any elected position, while we may run as a partisan, we have to represent everybody. And sometimes that requires building relationships with members of the other political party. And so that's one of my obligations, should be all of our obligations, to reach out to the new Congresswoman, whether we like her politics or not. I didn't vote for her, but she is in a position of power to be helpful to us. And we need to have a relationship. So that's the goal. There's about a $500 registration fee for the conference, about $500 to fly, about $1,000 a night for hotel rooms, and a couple of $1,000. For those who might think it is sort of a fringe benefit, you haven't been there in February. It's not a pleasant experience. But I'm willing to do that. But of course, if my commissioners don't feel it's necessary for us to be that engaged, I can stay home. I don't need an extra trip like that.
So I'm going to preempt you with apologies. There's an aphorism from some physicists, I think Georg Lichtenberg, if I recall correctly, and the most dangerous truths are the half-truths. What we have here is a bunch of arguments that are either advertisement, bad assumptions, or just plain specious. I'll be 75 in a couple of months, and I've been probably to more conferences than I would like to admit to. Those are all tied to the money spent by a private organization who lived and dies by, say, trade shows. We don't have that situation here. The attribution is to the sediment has been a political football for decades, it seems to me. There was an agreement, and the federal government was really abdicating its responsibilities, stepping away from its responsibilities. That was known for a long time. So I did a little bit of homework, and I asked some of our elected officials at the state level, and that's something I have to be a little careful of, because NACO itself is not a state level situation. But I thought our folks home would say, yeah, it's the best thing since sliced bread, or not. And I got pretty much it's an irrelevant organization. Now we've got about 3,200 counties in the nation, and I don't know how many are going to show up there, but if it's anything like the conference, an NACO conference I went to about 3 years ago, it's really nothing where any individual will even be noted. The pretense that one small county out of the 3,000 is going to go there and influence the nation or the federal stuff is a bit strange. The reason money is flowing now is because of the budgetary and ARPA and CARES funding that just made everybody feel flush. In that sense, then almost anything is, well, they'll fund it. Well, because they have more money than they have common sense. I won't go too far into that, but the things that are accomplished at a conference are typically inversely proportional to the number of attendees. When you a person mentioned earlier the PUD conference, well, they're not only PUD conferences, but there are other conferences for the treasurer, for the police officers, and so forth. Those are a very focused conference itself. The PUD has some pretty serious focused issues that are common around the country. It's not specific to Cowlitz County. And this is a different thing. This is just kind of like a good old boys club going to Washington with the brandy snifter in one hand and a cigar in the other to talk about the important problems of the people. Okay, so let's skip all the advertisement. I try to, as I've said, often go up to the 50,000 foot level and look down and see what has really been accomplished. In some cases, earlier today, we discussed on the negative aspects of agreeing to accepting $10,500. Well, there are a bunch of negative aspects about assuming that we should spend dollars doing the lobbying, but we do. We spend about $80,000 a year on a lobby organization called CFM. Are they doing a good job? It's a little bit hard to say, but I will accept that without a presence there, we're probably handicapped. What's my focus? Typically infrastructure stuff. One of the reasons the resolution on constraining the travel was put in because I would receive many, many negative comments about commissioners traveling. So this is a way that you, the public, can weigh in and see and decide for yourselves whether there is value here. I will recount one thing. The reason I went to the meeting, the NACO national meeting, this was in Las Vegas. I paid for my own travel and food. They paid for the hotel and the conference fee. I was told it'd be a wonderful experience. I'd learn all kinds of stuff. And I tend to think that if you're going to complain about something, you better go see about it and make sure that you're sort of naturally informed in it. Well, in my experience, there was extremely sad. A large portion of incompetent people. There were people holding conferences and the meetings who made me look like a Robert's Rules of Order genius. Did I learn anything that would help the county? Yes, I learned a thing that I'm trying to apply now is don't bother going. It's just a game, an elitist kind of game. If there's something of value that should be done here, we should argue it, but not in a forum like that. The other thing I learned from them was it was a forum for advertisement and aggrandizement. We're going to give awards to the best managed county, to the best this or that. I mean, we've got Hollywood for doing those things. The most common theme there was, one, how do we get more taxpayer funds? And two, watch me. I did a wonderful job. My state is perfect and I am the best thing since sliced bread. Okay, I'll stop here.
So you didn't go to a congressional conference?
Nope.
Nope.
It was.
So your assumptions on the effectiveness of communicating with members of Congress are not based on experience.
Well, that's actually true, except I'll fall back on what I always say. Look at it from 50,000 feet. I couldn't swear that you've ever been to Washington, D.C. or had all those trips that you've had. I cannot see an impact on it. Now, there's a time delay and all that, but the noise in the system far exceeds anything. The funding we got was as a result of, if nothing else, a plethora of funds available. Does that mean that you influenced it or not? Maybe it wasn't you, maybe it was CFM, maybe it was despite you and your pronouncements over there that we got the funding. We don't know, but we do know that it did change the life of anybody here in the county. Is the dredging taking place? No. Are we doing this survey? Well, that's an interesting thing. The survey itself could be done pretty economically. In fact, you were part of the arrangement where we put together $100,000 out of the local communities to do that. So when we had no choice, we took care of it ourselves. My main emphasis is always going to be politics is local, and we've got a state that needs to be curbed and reined in.
Any other comments?
I was just going to say that in my past life, there were times when we went to visit our elected officials, which would be the representatives and senators of this state. And many of them did not know some of the things that were going on locally because they're not always here. And I can see both sides of this argument. I was going to stand up and walk away while Arn was speaking. I can see both sides. I can see where there can be a benefit. So I'm not totally against, but I'm not totally for. Thank you.
Thank you.
You've got a hand up also. Yeah.
Who's first, the hand or me?
Go ahead.
Well, I've got to kind of split the difference here. And, you know, we use a term all the time, and it's a Glenn Morgan thing. Future belongs to those who show up. Now, in all this latest years of doing this and campaigning and stuff, I've been to all kinds of meetings and I've done all kinds of walking and talking to people. It doesn't always pan out. You run into brick walls. You find out that this area where I was working so hard, this certain subject or whatever, it turns out to be no good. But you aren't gonna know that unless you go find out. And, you know, I believe you guys are gonna hate me for this. Dennis is a skilled politician. And, you know, sometimes you gotta have a presence. Sometimes it doesn't do anything, but you gotta have it. Now, Dennis, I think we'd all feel better if when you went on these little trips, you come back and give us a nice report, you know, write us a little essay about it and let us see what you're doing, you know, and be a little more transparent. You know, I mean, I talked to this guy, it didn't work out. I talked to this guy over here that I never knew about, but it paid off. And, you know, if we could see some kind of reporting like that, we'd probably be a little more behind it. Personally, I'm going back to future belongs to those who show up. These guys are going to get together. They're going to make a bunch of big decisions. We should at least have a presence there to know what those decisions are. So I make a motion to send Dennis to Washington, D.C., a one-way ticket, and then he can send us some emails back about what he's doing.
Thanks, Tim.
Morning. I just had a question about the National Association of Counties. Do they ever propose policy, or is that anything that comes from the National Association of Counties, or?
So there is an annual conference, and that might have been the one that you went to, that they have in various different locations. And I don't go to those. I key the value is in Washington, D.C., going to that. I've been to a couple of other ones, but that was in conjunction with duties with the state association, and they paid the cost for those trips. But so the National Association does have conferences, and they do pass resolutions and make policy decisions. And then the staff that they direct works to pursue those policy objectives. One of the ones that has regularly brought a little bit of money to Cowlitz County has been Secure Rural Schools, which is a form of a PILT, payment in lieu of taxes, because we have so much federal land in Cowlitz County, and it's based on a formula. Compared to some other counties like Skamania, which is 96% federally owned, our share is relatively small, so not a huge amount. But there are some counties that get six figures in income as part of their regular budgets. So that's been quite a few activities that they do. The ARPA monies that Arn talked about was something I had never seen in the 50 some odd years that I've been involved in politics in one way or the other. And normally it would be, oh my gosh, there are going to be so many rules and regulations that it's not going to be, our hands are going to be tied to a great extent. A lot of the money that comes down to us through ARPA is without rules. And that's due exactly to the lobbying effort of the National Association. And those areas that are designated for certain uses, there's still broad discretion on what we end up using it on. Like so much on infrastructure. Well, what specifically we want to address it on is done that. So there are those kinds of things. They're also in the federal government trying to advocate for or against administrative decisions that are made in Washington, D.C. with the vast federal bureaucracy. And again, one of the areas that they have focused on is what is called Waters of the United States rules. And that was a proposal by what I would term as extreme environmentalists to basically claim federal jurisdiction over puddles and ditches in addition to rivers and streams. And in fact, during the Trump administration, the proposed rules were basically set to the side in part, in collaboration with the county. That has reappeared with the Biden administration, but at least my understanding so far is that it's been softened over the process. And again, because of the influence of county associations. There are a lot of little things like that, in total, it's a large thing. The elected officials set forward the national organization. They're working 24/7 in DC, trying to advocate for counties. I mentioned earlier that a couple of the meetings that I went to, President Trump came, and it was absolutely incredible, the response from the audience of NACO in support of President Trump. And I've also heard President Biden as well. And interestingly, the applause was respectful, but not as overwhelming as with President Trump. So it's been an interesting experience to do that. But I appreciated Tim's comment about being at the table. It is important that our members of Congress know who Cowlitz County is, and rather than a source of votes or a source of no votes. So.
Yeah, sorry, my question's probably kind of not pertaining to the conference, but more to the National Association of Counties. Their policy that they pass or whatever, is that something that gets recommended to the counties that are part of the organization?
So I mentioned to you before that with the state association, I'm on the committee for federal issues, and we came up with a statement that was adopted by the state association that includes a pretty large position statement about Mount St. Helens and sediment management. So the next step is at this conference, there will be the consideration of adopting that for NACO policy. So it's that kind of a delegation of authority and getting a sense of what the people in the various counties support.
Yeah, I haven't looked very much into NACO. I just know the National Governors Association, those types of organizations, they really worry me. Especially with the governors, the nursing home death policy when COVID first started, and they were putting COVID positive patients in the nursing homes and being paid for it. That was all passed through the National Governors Association and kind of just pushed, almost like a virus itself to different states. We were Washington was kind of the first one to make headlines, but actually Andrew Cuomo of New York was the chair of the National Governors Association at the time, and New York did it as well. And that all came from the National Governors Association. So like I said, I'm not sure with the policy, if it's if you're a member, you have a certain responsibility to implement these policies, or if it's if you're a member, you're going to get kind of lobbied to implement those policies. But the National Governors Association, I've kind of looked into that, and that really worries me. But
it doesn't seem to be quite the same type of organization. Yeah, some of those national organizations raise campaign funds. And National Counties does not engage in that.
Yeah, I'm sure it's different when you're a governor. It's on the national stage is just a huge, just that image alone is a huge sway over your policy. So, okay, thank you.
Thank you. We have two hands up from attendees. Let's go with Tom Samuels and then Darcy back again. Tom?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. So I assume we're into the constituent comment section here since you already voted on the motion.
Well, we haven't. We're kind of in the debate of the motion on travel allowance.
Then my comment is not about your travel plan, so I can sure come back on if that's preferable.
We'll do that. Darcy?
Yeah, just a clarification. Were you just telling the previous speaker that was seated at the desk that your progress on the sediment project hinges on your attendance to this conference?
I wouldn't say hinges at all. No, it's all part of that relationship. When I tie in the National Congressional Conference, part of that is meeting with our congressional delegation and reiterating their support for the program. And the funding was restored, but budgets only go 1 year at a time. So that presence needs to be there so that the funding continues. We lost it once because of inattention. When I don't think we should take the risk of having it fall by the wayside again.
Okay, I would agree that that's a very important project that you do need to, that the county does need to stay on top of. But can I just say one more thing that kind of is leaving a bad taste in my mouth is this idea of relationships. It kind of speaks of the buddy system, the good old boys or something. I don't know. It just doesn't sound right. It sounds like you have to have your friends have your back, or the citizens aren't going to get the service from their government.
All right, anything else? Okay. Yes, Ron?
Just to follow up your mention of the congressional delegation and certainly the recognition that we have a new representative from Southwest Washington in the House of Representatives, and that I'm counting on you as a proficient politician to go ahead and engage that network that we need to have Cowlitz County with this new representative and get her truly informed and being a representative of all of Cowlitz County as context with Southwest Washington. So therefore, I look forward to what connections you three commissioners representing our county are going to have specifically with our new representative in Washington, D.C. And hopefully she doesn't just vote along the line of the 212 on every vote.
And the sentiment issue is important, but infrastructure needs are also always on the radar screen.
Just for clarification, is this a National Association of Counties? Is this a organization that you belong to, that you pay dues to monthly or annually? Correct?
The county does, yes.
Do they have basically a full-time paid lobbyist?
They have a full-time staff, yes.
Okay, so you have input to them from right here on a regular basis as a dues paying member, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So the difference between you giving them input from here as opposed to being personally involved there is basically the ability for you to be face to face with our congressperson or those people that are involved at the federal level. That's basically the difference.
Yeah, and being part of coalitions with other commissioners, with other members of Congress. I mean, our three members of the congressional delegation can't pass any law by themselves. So it's reaching out. I will share that, and my colleagues Arn probably remembers. I did go back to DC once and really arguing on behalf of the concept that the state of Washington was actually violating the federal constitution and interfering with interstate and foreign trade in their opposition to the construction of the coal export facility. And I met with senator staffers from Montana and Wyoming all the way out to Oregon and Washington, and even again, the whole idea is trying to build this notion of a coalition, meeting with commissioners from Wyoming as part of this whole effort to try to get the state of Washington out of the way and let the economics really work. That ultimately was a big failure. The president's administration did not choose to do what they had the power to do and override the governor. And to this day, I have no understanding why President Trump decided to support Jay Inslee on that whole issue. It's beyond me because it's so antithetical to what he promised, but that was then. And obviously, my efforts came up short, and that sometimes that happens. And
Okay, I guess I'm good. I don't know where to go from there.
thanks.
In order to try to make sense of this, I've numbered the items on my paper. And to do it the right way, I'll start with item number 7, to somewhat address what Steve just said and what the lady that wanted to know about relationships and having a problem with that. First thing, when I said I was a lobbyist, I was not a paid lobbyist. I had to register because if you follow the fine print in the Washington state election laws and the PDC, if you testify on a bill more than 6 times, you better be a lobbyist. Otherwise, you're bending the rules. Okay, relationships. When I helped push a bill through the legislature a long time ago, John Pennington, who was a state representative from here, asked me if I'd seen it on TV or if I was there in person. I said, no. And he said, hey, I wanted you to be there. Sid Snyder, who was a senator of the 19th, which was my district at the time, he goes, hey, were you there to watch this? They look for real people. And believe it or not, as much as this disgusts the crowd, you 3 are real people when you get back to Washington, D.C. They are sick and tired of lobbyists because they see them every day and their story's the same. You offer a different perspective and a different look. And when I had Sid Snyder, the late senator, and John Pennington asked me if I was there to see it go through, that tells you the legislators, whether it's on the state level, and if you can connect with somebody in D.C., you're going to get the same thing. Like when Jamie Herrera was elected Congresswoman and got on the Appropriations Committee. That had huge benefits, and if you didn't go there, you're not going to tap into that. Now I'll get back to the list. Number 1, levels of government should not compete with each other for money. I agree with that wholeheartedly. That's not a true statement. Number 2, if you complain about it, you better go see. I absolutely concur with that. I did that to PUD 20 some odd years ago. I went and complained about a rate hike. So I figured I better start going to some meetings and figure out what's going on there and why what's going on is going on. Number 3, we talk about issues which are measurable. And I've heard mentioned in this room several times in the last few months, exit 21. I heard today mentioned the Cowlitz River. Well, every now and then, if you watch TV, you're going to see the interstate bridge come on there. And if there's going to suck, something is going to suck every transportation dollar out of the room, it's the interstate bridge. There will be nothing left for exit 21 and nothing left for the Cowlitz River because that is viewed as part of the transportation because it puts the sediment in the Columbia River shipping channel. So if you're not involved there, there will be 0 for those things. I can guarantee you that because that bridge is going to take up every dollar that's out there and a whole lot more. Number 4, if you are told no and you go back there and you've been told no something here, you can go back there and you can ask the person that's on a particular committee why they said no. When you find out why they said no, you push further down that avenue. Number 5, the new congressperson. She posed herself to be a very conservative Democrat during the election. And I say that as a Democratic PCO, 9-term standing. It might be a great time to ask her exactly where she's going to be. And as you well know, since you're all 3 Republicans, the people who represent the very rural part of the state are 2 Republicans. They've been there quite some time, and they would probably be very good allies to work with our new Congresswoman from the 3rd Congressional District of Washington. That's an avenue worth pursuing when you get your 5 minutes to talk to her face to face at a reception somewhere. Number 6, it's important that they know who we are. I think I just touched on that, and I touched on the first part of when I brought up this item number 7. With that, I'll cut it short because we've had way too much time spent on this agenda today with only 3 motion items. It's well after 11 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll offer some thoughts here because I've talked about it a little bit before, but from the private sector, I've been back to Washington D.C. and I've seen how that works. And if it's done right, it's a bigger version of what you have right here. You're walking in and you're talking to us. Well, that's what we did as an industry. We walked in and we talked to our people and we had a game plan. I can tell you, and while did they sit there and cut a check to my institution right there? No. But you got legislation that came about because of those conversations, just like you have here. And you have to be diligent about those. Credit unions being able to do business lending, that was more than a 1-year commitment of people back in Washington, D.C. talking to representatives from every state, from every deal. So I think I enjoy the opportunity to talk this year, because I think you're giving marching orders to what you want to see when somebody goes back. And the cost of this thing, I actually looked it up last night, because these kind of things roll around in my head. You're talking about around two grand. I think round trip flight was about 600, motel was $250 a night, probably for our many nights, and some food and stuff. So you're somewhere around that $2 grand thing. And at this point in time, I'm willing to put that out there and have one of our people go back and be diligent about the things that we need, just like you're diligent about the things you need before us. And you need to continue to hold our feet to the fire. When we come back, what did you do and what did you gain? What do you see down the road? So with that explanation, I would move to approve this travel for Dennis back to Washington, D.C.
All right. I think we have a motion, but they're the same motion, right?
It's a motion, yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Opposed.
I vote aye. That motion carries. Thank you very much. Now we have some time for citizens' comments, some additional citizen comment.
Just out of curiosity on that issue that you just approved, is there any reason that two or three of you, all three of you couldn't go back?
Well, we couldn't be all together on the same flight.
The temptation to talk policy would be pretty powerful. We'd have to be isolated, which kind of defeats the purpose of.
Well, one of you can ride on the wing of the plane. I don't care.
But however, I think it is a good idea that it should not just be one person. We should rotate. Absolutely, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, I think either A, for the experience and information, either A, you should rotate it, or B, if there's value in presence and pursuing that concept of the whole thing, then I'm not so sure why more than one of you shouldn't go. Especially if you have a hot topic that you're really trying to pursue and get taken care of, Mount St. Helens and the filling in of the Lower Columbia River. I think that's one of the biggest threats to Cowlitz County that exists. But it's just a thought.
Thank you. From the attendees, Tom Samuels. Tom, you're still muted.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, and I'm using a different microphone, so hopefully it doesn't pulse in and out. Good morning, commissioners. Last Tuesday, I asked Commissioner Dahl if he had spoken with Chris Swanson about the Hope Village project before making his decision to deny the interlocal agreement proposal a place on the board's agenda. He plainly stated, quote, "She's never told the truth, so why would I speak to her? She sits up there and bald-faced lies. There's no reason to meet with her," end quote. The next day at the Wednesday afternoon work session, which ironically was a 2-hour-long opportunity for Community House on Broadway to make a nebulous sales pitch for an aspirational project that its backers would have to admit is still very much on the drawing board and teeming with unanswered questions as compared to the up and running Hope Village project, but I digress. I asked Commissioner Dahl at that meeting to back up his bold words with any evidence, Ms. Swanson had lied about Hope Village or any other time for that matter. Cowardly, though perhaps unsurprisingly, he refused to offer any and sheepishly sat silent. And so his defamatory accusations remain a part of the public record. This is unacceptable. Barely a month into his tenure, Commissioner Dahl has proved he has no fidelity to the truth and will utilize lies when it suits his agenda. Of course, this plays well to his base, who clearly have a firm grip on his reins. He is also now echoing Commissioner Mortenson's blatant lies about the number of individuals Hope Village can serve in a year and the corresponding cost per person. He's even taken to derisively calling Hope Village, and I quote, hopeless village, end quote. And in the same breath, he pretends to be inspired by the teachings of Jesus Christ and that accordingly, he is walking in faith. Thou shalt not bear false witness, Commissioner? I'm calling on every county employee listening to this meeting to stand up for the truth. It's plain to see the next 2 years are going to be fraught with deception, defamation, and derision. Chair Weber can't stand in the breach alone as Commissioners Mortensen and Dahl run roughshod over the county in pursuit of their Trumpy, Ayn Randian agenda. Especially if you are an elected official and not a direct subordinate of the Board of Commissioners, you must step up for truth and decency and demand Commissioner Dahl publicly retract his lies about Chris Swanson, a person you've all known for 20+ years to have the highest integrity in her various roles as an exemplary public servant. If you fail to do that, you are condoning his lies, and through your silence, you become complicit to them. Thank you very much. Have a good day.
Okay. Anyone else?
Yeah. Man, I haven't had a chance to speak in a few weeks, and gosh, I got such a can of worms. And it's funny because I get into what we're doing at the moment. And congratulations on your trip to DC. I hope it's I know February is not a good time to be there. At any rate, let's go back to, let's see where to begin with my can of worms, because backed up. So we talked about the private security Phoenix, right? I believe this is a kind of like an example of what's happened, because its root cause is the fact that we don't put anybody in jail around here. You got these wild people roaming the streets, and we had to get the gosh darn auditor's office, had some guy in there doing indecent things, got taken away by the police, didn't get put in jail, came right back and did it again. So now we got to get Phoenix security to guard this building. And I got that. Is that $400,000 a year, or is that like that's not really that's more of a rhetorical question, I suppose, but it's a lot of money. And the fact is, they didn't lock that guy up. And this is the example that just goes on and on. They didn't lock that guy up. So he came right back and did it again. Now, my question mainly this week is, what in the heck is going on with the jail now? Because I understand they're still like refusing people and stuff, and like the COVID emergency is over even by Jay Inslee's standards, right? I mean, there's no reason to not be putting people into jail, especially when they're doing weird shit like that. Excuse my language.
So it's understandable. You're a little bit behind. We had a meeting yesterday morning. The latest report from the director of the jail was that virtually all restrictions have been ended. And in fact, I think you might want to correct me if I get it mixed up. She said that if there are law enforcement officers that really feel strongly about a particular suspect that they've got in custody, needs to be in jail, that her officers on duty have been instructed to work it out. So they're trying to keep those cells filled. She also says, remember, there are other rules at play, and oftentimes it's a matter of bail, and the judges control the flow of whether bail is is provided or revoked or not provided. And so that is also one of the causes of what would seem they go in and they come right back out if they post bail, if they've been given bail. So it's not just a Department of Corrections issue with the jail restrictions, which at the base was an attempt to try to prevent people having mental episodes from damaging or assaulting other criminals. So rather than filling the jail the way it was designed with double bunks, most of them are single because of the increase in mental illness amongst the prisoners. Did I summarize that okay? I can't remember if I missed some of the details.
I asked her some questions on that yesterday. The number she gave yesterday was 225, which is still higher than it has been, but we hold over 300 if I remember right. So she says they have a trouble. Western State is flat out telling them there's no beds available. And so what that causes, she called it felony flips. The prosecutor, when they sit in there so long on a bigger charge, but there's no beds available and they have no place, they're not going to go anywhere, then the prosecutor flips the charge to a lower level crime so they can do something else with them. I don't necessarily agree with that they do that, but that sounds like it's happening. I also asked on the Department of Corrections how they work with them, because I saw some of them at the Highlands thing. And so I was more out of curiosity.
So you're talking about the State Department of Corrections on state parole. Okay.
Yeah. And she said they will now, for a while, they weren't taking any, it sounded like, but now they'll take up to 4 a day and they're not seeing that many. Most of those are warrant violations, it sounds like to me, from what I understand. But I'm not telling you there's not a lot of work to do there.
I think that
Marin is online. Marin, go ahead if you want to
Hi,
add.
good morning. Marin Fox, Director of Corrections. We don't have any restrictions on misdemeanors other than driving with a suspended license. So if anyone's contacted in the community on shoplifting or any other nuisance crime, we are accepting on those bookings.
So that's new then. I mean,
We've been
refreshed.
We've been making changes to that gradually over the past 6 months with input from the chiefs and sheriff. And as of middle December, we are open for all crimes except for DWLS. And as far as the DOC bookings go, we agreed with the State Department of Corrections to begin taking 4 a day from them. They've not brought us 4 a day since we've agreed to that. And that is not within my realm of control. That's at a state level. But
Okay,
as
so,
Commissioner Weber pointed out, the judges are releasing people the next day. That's not something we have any control over. That is, the judicial decision is not something within the control of the Corrections Department.
Right. We know how broken that system is. Now, they had mentioned that they had Phoenix security over at the Juvenile Detention Center. Is that right? They're guarding over there, the Juvenile Center?
Well, they have one of those scanners in that entry points at juvie that used to be operated by a deputy. So when we got rid of the deputies doing scanner stuff, that was part of that contract. So that's why
it's my understanding that building is more or less empty, right? I mean, they've got like 3 or 4 kids in there, and then there's.
And in fact, we have recognized that, and we've begun the discussions on, are there some alternative uses? Right now, there is a state law that says because Cowlitz County is over 50,000 in population, we must operate a juvenile center 24/7.
Yeah.
Even though we have, maybe we're lucky if we get a dozen.
Yeah. Well, this
really
is
low.
the fact that we don't have a lot of kids in jail is probably a good thing. But my point is just you're paying somebody a lot of money to sit there and not do a lot. What I wanted, another place where Phoenix is guarding and where we've had sheriff's guards and civilian guards apparently over at the courthouse. Got to walk through a scanner, right? Why? Why do we have a scanner there? Why do you have to go through a metal detector? It's a rhetorical question, basically. Why do you have to go through a metal detector there? And why do you have to have an officer there, an armed officer at the door of the county courthouse, right? Why? Because you don't want somebody to go in there and shoot them up, right? Then my question is, why don't we have that at the school? You can walk into any school. Man, you know, I've been around seeing my kids in school and stuff, and it's like, geez, Louise, man, there's no protection there, none. So to me, it feels a little misplaced. You know what I mean? We're going to protect a bunch of people or provide security for a place that's empty. But over here, where there's like proven threats against the kids, right? Why don't we have our schools more protected? And apparently, you know, we're not going to get this from the federal government or the state government. They seem to think that having a police officer in school is a bad thing. And to me, I wouldn't use a police officer. I would have a guard. You know, if you're going to use a real guard that's done guard duty, you know, our veterans, you know, if you've ever done guard duty and fallen asleep on guard duty and had somebody come up your neck, then you know not to fall asleep on guard duty. It's kind of like a horrible, boring job. And I think we've got a wealth of people that know how to do that job that don't necessarily have to come from a private firm or from our sheriff's department out enforcing the law, but to guard the school, literally guard it. And the fact that you don't go through a metal detector to go into the school and that there isn't a secure places for in the schools are horribly not protected, while at the same time we're protecting and spending lots of money to protect, you know, people that do what? I don't know. It's not that I'd say sacrifice one for the other, but that's what we're doing right now. We're sacrificing the school so we can guard the courthouse, which has been basically closed, right? I mean, but school is going on. I feel like I'm starting to talk in a circle now because so many things have been by. I didn't get a chance to come in here the last few weeks, and I just want to say Happy New Year, you guys. And man, I really enjoy our chances to sit here and chat things out, you know? Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. And it is interesting, in my teaching career, I know the benefits were pretty tremendous to have the school officer present at various times during the school week, not to protect, not to check everybody coming and going, but to spend time interacting with kids. In the meantime, you may have noticed that both Longview and Kelso have done a lot of extensive remodeling, because it is absolutely true. Most school constructions years ago had multiple exits and entrances, and most of the new construction has reduced the exit and entry points. That's security, trying to make sure they have a better opportunity to make controls. So they've made some changes and spent some money at the school level, and some of that money does come from the state government to do that. But it's not like, you know, a scanner at every entrance, because the institutions are pretty big on that. Why a 6-year-old would go in and shoot his teacher with his mother's gun is just bizarre. Yeah. Well, maybe not. Who knows?
I mean, you might get a strong bond. Still, even at the courthouse, you gotta have your stuff x-rayed, you gotta x-ray your little backpack and stuff. I mean, at the airport, you can go in and get the full body x-ray. I don't think we're doing enough to protect our kids. I mean, I'm not trying to take things away from anybody else, but our child's protection at schools, it really stuff up a lot. Well, you know, you're at zero now, so anything you do.
All right. Anyone else?
Oh, goodness, come on.
Well, you know, I just never know what you're going to say to me the week after the next.
Before it leaves my brain, that was a great great turnout for the,
That was really
the
good,
satellite
wasn't it?
office.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we missed you.
Yeah, I was attending a meeting, so Arn could go. I was his alternate, so.
We missed you.
Yeah.
It was good. It was good. I just had the opportunity to let somebody know that you guys are not involved or in charge of the needle exchange, correct? I found the web address and I have shared it because apparently it's an issue.
Hmm.
I just wanted to let you know that I'm doing the research and sharing wealth of knowledge that you have shared with me.
You might ask, if you have an interaction with the director or whoever's in charge, and ask them if they are still if they still have the limits.
Okay,
When we were involved and shortly after they sent it to Family Health Center, they did implement some rules, kind of modeled on what some of our recommendations had been, but they were going to limit, each individual could only take away 100 at a
Well-
time instead of arm loads for multiple clients. And that should have, at least initially, the one report we got
Okay.
back was
That's
that
good
the
to
numbers
know.
went down. And also you might ask them about the actual exchange bank that they operated, which was an interesting concept that they would keep track of how many syringes you brought in, so that if you didn't bring as many in the next time, you got a credit and you could still. And they said the surprising thing was a little bit of an incentive.
Yeah.
Brought far more syringes in than.
so maybe
than they
not
were getting
leave
back.
them in
So-
the street.
So you
or
might check
something.
and see if they're
Yeah.
still doing those kinds of
Okay.
things, because if the litter is getting worse again.
Yeah.
They may have made some
It
change,
happens, yeah.
but they don't check in with us anymore. So.
Okay. I did want to thank you, gentlemen, for the conversations we've been able to have on many topics. And I appreciate the way that you have been allowing us to speak. I don't know that I've thanked you, so I just wanted to thank you. And then
Appreciate it.
I would really like to hear back when you come back from DC. And
Oh,
pictures,
well, I
maybe a
don't-
slideshow,
I don't know.
like
Now,
maybe, and if
I were
now-
taking
so-
a vacation, I could, but
like, well, no, seriously, like, I'm a history nerd, so if you're there, and I know that this is like a historical place, like, so if you take a picture or something, like, this is a monumental place right here, like, take a picture of that certain spot. Yeah, that kind of stuff too. That kind of stuff intrigues me. So I would love to, because you're going over there and, I would like to hear about it. We don't normally hear about these trips that people take. So I would like to hear about it. If you could tell us, you were a history teacher, correct? I would like to hear some historical facts about things.
be careful what you ask for.
No, I'm seriously, that's
No,
part of my thing. So I would,
I would be glad to.
all right. All right, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for today's meeting.
Thank
Thank you for coming.
Anything else to be brought to our attention? All right, thank you very much. Oh, Steve. Oh.
Just for information, do you know what number out of the 39 counties Cowlitz County is listed as? What number are we designated?
I think we're ranked 12th in population.
But each county has a number out of 39 counties. According to our Department of Revenue, do you know which number we
Oh,
are?
Nope, I don't have that information. That's, the treasurer could tell you that, or the auditor.
Well, maybe when you're back in DC, you can ask around, okay?
Oh, well, you're talking about a federal number.
No. Each state has a number, and according to my quarterly tax returns, I'm supposed to put down the number of Cowlitz County. Now, I know some of the counties, but I don't, we used to be designated N on the
On the
license plate.
License plates, yeah, I was gonna say that.
And I think we were the 5th county. But even when,
Historically, you mean the fifth one created?
Well,
Sounds about right.
I know Lewis County was the 1st,
Well, Clark County was first, but Lewis was right next to it. And they argue about that, of course.
but they expect the taxpayers to know the number of their county. So now I'm asking you elected officials, what number are we?
Make a note.
Well, anyway, this is the reason I came. I will make one comment. I'm amazed when I usually attended these commissioners meetings years ago with various commissioners, you could hear the crickets. Now I have to ask, am I in Cowlitz County now with all these citizens' comments? I'm amazed.
Yeah, it's good.
Anyway, recording fees. And since nobody's come to an agreement on who's going to pay for the city of Longview wants you to pay for their homeless camp in Alabama. But that's a deadlock too, am I correct?
That has not come
Or
before us
you-
for a decision.
You voted not to put it on the agenda, as I recall. Well, anyway, I found out before the holidays, I needed to do a title search, actually a survey map search. And I went down to the auditor's office and I was told by one of the clerks that the vault where all the county records were had been turned into offices for other bureaucrats, specifically the elections department. Well, I asked, what did you do with all the records of Cowlitz County? Well, we sent them to the state archives. So being a diligent person, I went up to the state archives. Well, first of all, the comment by one of your clerks in the auditor's office was, the state's better at storing documents. Well, I went up to the state archives and I asked the person there, could you show me where the Cowlitz County records are stored? Well, we don't know. They're stored off-site somewhere. If you give us a specific item, maybe, that's a key word there, maybe we could find it. Well, the last time I recorded a document was in 2013. And it had gone up considerably from 10 to 25. And in 2013, it was $65. And it was the power of attorney for my late father. So I had to pay the $65. Now, your current item, recording legal instruments, first page, $200. Now, obviously, you're not going to use it for the homeless camp. And we can't access the documents because they don't know where they're at. And they're no longer here in Cowlitz County. And as an example, the National Archives at Sand Point in Seattle, they stopped them from moving those documents to California. We can thank the Indians for that because most of the treaties were up there. And it seemed logical. You should leave the items that are assigned to that region in that region, which is my point. If we can't access our own public documents and we're paying an exorbitant amount, and then we were told by a county employee in the auditor's office that, oh, the state's better at it. And then you go to the state and they don't know where they're at. So why are we paying $200? And you people are obviously not going to use it for the homeless camp. So going back to Mr. or Commissioner Mortensen's point about a welfare state, here you've got articles of public documents, which are, in my case, maybe needed for a boundary dispute sometime in the near future. And nobody knows where they're at, but yet we're paying $200 for a first page. Don't you think that's a little ridiculous?
Yep. So let me start the ball rolling for at least, and my colleagues can chime in. First off, the document recording fee is not set by this board. It's set by the state legislature, and they've designated how that $100 is to be split up. A bunch of it stays with us for basically two purposes of addressing affordable housing and addressing homelessness.
Well, how about addressing
So
it for the
addressing-
specific
so
item?
addressing- So the addressing affordable housing, we recently allocated about $1.5 million to two projects that are building affordable houses by design. One is an extension of the Campus Towers facility off of 20th Avenue. And the other one is a new apartment complex being built behind the Presbyterian Church off of 38th in Pennsylvania. And we have for years been supporting a small group home that handles up to 6 disabled senior or disabled men. What else? There's one or two other little smaller dollar program addressing homelessness.
Then why should public spend these exorbitant amounts for documents that we can't access? And you're using it not for the purpose it was intended.
Yeah. I think it's too high.
Well,
But,
wouldn't you call that fraud?
I wouldn't, but
I know you wouldn't. So how the hell are
but
we
not
supposed
necessarily
to,
good public policy.
How the hell are we supposed to access these documents when nobody knows where they're at
Well,
and we're paying for it?
my understand is.
Well,
it
yeah, you
is
can
on-
pass the buck.
My
to the
understand is
state.
it is available online, but but I'm not,
When
I'm not an expert in that, so.
when the people responsible for storing these documents don't know where the hell they're at, you think they know where they're at online?
Well, I know there's a whole industry called title insurance companies that do access that material all the time because that's the job they do.
Well, if the people who are responsible for storing the documents in the county auditor's office and the state archives don't know where the hell they're at, what do you expect these title companies to do? Oh, we don't know.
Well, I mean, I don't know the correct answer, obviously, and
It's called
actually, I would
counterintelligence.
suggest though, that you go either to the assessor's office or the auditor's office and just say, I'm trying to find this
I
document.
already did, and they told me they don't, the state's better at it, and then the state tells me, we don't know where they're at. They're not even in the state archives. They're stored in some warehouse somewhere. Brilliant.
Yeah.
Oh, and when you're in Washington, make sure you, as an example of this example, make sure you visit that building with 5 sides. It's a tribute to Murphy's Law, like this county and this state archives. And we're paying $200 for Murphy's Law.
Okay. Thanks. Anyone else? All right. That concludes our business for today. Thank you. This meeting is adjourned.